Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 234, titled When Grief Breaks Your Personality. What if grief isn't breaking you, but interrupting a strategy that can no longer protect you? Most people tell me some version of this after a loss. I don't recognize myself anymore. Grief can overwhelm the strategies we've relied upon to feel safe, secure, or connected in the world. But when those strategies stop working, it can feel like our personality is falling apart. When we feel like our identity and personality is falling apart, this is where the Enneagram can help. Not to label us, but to give us language to the survival strategies that our nervous system has relied on. In this episode, we're going to take a look at how grief interrupts those strategies and what it asks of us instead. And so we'll explore 3 common needs: security, safety, and belonging, and the way your system might be reaching for them when familiar coping patterns fail. By the end, hopefully you will see that what feels like breaking is actually a chance to notice, support, and restore yourself from the inside out. And from a restorative grief perspective, it makes sense that we don't recognize ourselves after a loss. Grief threatens the most basic human need: safety, security, and belonging. And when those needs feel unstable or unmet, the nervous system responds long before we have words for what is happening. Grief can overwhelm the strategies we rely on to meet those needs, and when those strategies stop working, it can feel like our personality is falling apart. But what if grief is not revealing who you really are or breaking you, but interrupting a survival pattern that can no longer carry the weight of your life? That question matters, especially when we bring in the Enneagram framework. At its core, the Enneagram is motivation-centered, not behavior-centered. Each type describes a strategy that the nervous system learned early to secure safety, security, or belonging in an unpredictable world. Over time, those strategies can feel like identity. Grief is one of the clearest ways to see how fragile that identity can be. See, loss does not come with a manual, unfortunately. Most of us are left trying to figure out what actually supports us while we're in the middle of it. So in restorative grief work, we use integrative and trauma-informed approaches to make sense of what does not make sense. Safety, security, and belonging show up again and again as core needs that feel disrupted for grievers, and that is super important to keep in mind. Now, if you know your Enneagram type, you may hear yourself in parts of this, but if you don't know it, that's completely okay. What matters is recognizing what your nervous system reaches for first when grief threatens these needs. One of the biggest myths about grief is that it reveals our truest self. People may become more direct or less filtered after loss, but grief actually exposes the strategies we use to manage stress, pain, and uncertainty. From an Enneagram perspective, it is normal and healthy for your sense of self to feel disrupted during grief, because much of what we call personality is an adaptive performance. It's just a way we've learned to meet our needs. So when grief dismantles those adaptations, it can feel like we've lost ourselves. This is one reason grief work is often resisted. Loss already takes so much, and then grief asks us to face our secondary losses: the roles, the identities, and the strategies that no longer work. The Enneagram gives us language to name those survival strategies with compassion, so we can see not just how we've been protecting ourselves, but what our nervous system is asking for now. So let's look at this through what I call a grief adaptive coping triad. Now, it's important to clarify what I mean by this triad. Again, it isn't a predictive map of behavior, and it isn't rigidly tied to specific types. It's simply a familiar container, the triad language, to help us notice when our nervous system might be asking for when grief threatens security, safety, or belonging. Any type can reach for any of these needs depending on the situation. So the triad is a flag to notice, not a rule to follow. It's a way to give language to instinctive survival responses so we can approach them with curiosity and compassion. If you are familiar with the traditional Enneagram triads, this will feel unfamiliar. This is not about social style or how we move toward or away from the world. Again, it's about internal motivation. It's to name the need the nervous system is trying to restore when grief disrupts our sense of safety, security, or belonging. So for what I call the security triad, 1s, 3s, and 5s, security has often been created through competence, through doing things well, being effective, being prepared, understanding systems, and maintaining integrity. These strategies can be supportive until grief arrives, because loss cannot be solved. There is nothing to fix, improve, or accomplish that restores order. So when competence no longer produces security, these nervous systems often feel disoriented. Shame may quietly surface or loudly surface. Overfunctioning may lead to exhaustion. Withdrawal may feel safer than continuing to try and fail. And from a restorative grief lens, this is not collapse. It is the nervous system realizing that effort is no longer the path to security. The invitation here is not to do grief better, but to allow support and tolerate uncertainty without self-judgment. For the belonging triad, 2s, 4s, and 9s, survival has often been organized around belonging, being needed, emotionally attuned, or maintaining harmony. But grief frequently disrupts belonging because support systems change. People may not know how to show up. Pain can feel isolating even when others are present. And in response, 2s may overgive and abandon themselves. 4s may deepen into pain to stay connected to it. 9s may numb or disappear to avoid further rupture. Restorative grief reminds us that belonging cannot be forced or managed. Presence matters more than closeness. These types are invited to stay connected to themselves when external belonging feels inconsistent or unavailable, and to let grief exist without having to relationally regulate it. And for the safety triad, the 6s, 7s, and 8s, survival has often revolved around safety, anticipating danger, staying mobile and optimistic, or maintaining control. But grief destabilizes these strategies. Loss reminds us that danger cannot always be predicted or avoided. 6s may feel flooded with anxiety, 7s may find pain impossible to outrun, and 8s may experience intensified anger or shutdown. Ask me how I know. These nervous system responses to a world that no longer feels safe are normal. And in restorative grief, the safety is not restored through strategy. It is rebuilt slowly through relational support, bodily regulation, and permission to soften. Every human nervous system needs safety, security, and belonging. Naming one as primary under threat does not mean the others disappear. What this triad is naming is the automatic lens our nervous system applies first before conscious choice is available. And this is different from other Enneagram triads that describe our behaviors or our postures in the world. This lens, again, is about motivation and survival under overwhelm. Grief narrows our options before it expands them. It pulls us into reflexive strategies that once worked well enough to keep us safe. Naming this is not so that we can eliminate those strategies. It helps us to recognize them with compassion, slow them down, and build enough embodied capacity that new responses can emerge. Grief is not just emotional or psychological. It is a full body experience. When loss overwhelms us, the nervous system moves into protection before personality can organize meaning. And this is why grief can look like regression. Feeling younger, more reactive, or less capable is not a loss of maturity. It is the body responding honestly to threat and rupture. So grief pushes us outside of our Enneagram type's comfort zone. Familiar strategies stop working. Stress patterns emerge, but this is not failure. It is just your nervous system looking for regulation and support. And our intentional grief work invites us to slow this process down. So instead of asking, what is wrong with me? We might start asking what my nervous system is responding to. And instead of trying to return to who we once were, we build capacity within to stay present with what is here and now. So here is a reframe you can try on for size. You are not losing yourself in grief. Your personality is not breaking beyond repair. You're no longer fun to be with? I disagree. You are becoming much more rich and deep and complex as a person. And your nervous system is telling the truth before your personality has time to catch up. So when we listen to that truth with compassion, we create conditions for restoration, not by forcing coherence or performing, but by allowing the body to lead us toward what it needs next. Now let me leave you with this question to self-reflect. If your grief isn't breaking you, but simply interrupting a strategy that can no longer protect you, how might you respond with curiosity, compassion, and capacity, letting your nervous system guide you toward restoration? Thank you for listening to episode 234 of Restorative Grief. Whether this is your first or your 500th encounter with the Enneagram, I hope these ideas help you soften toward yourself as you grieve. The criticism is real and loud and usually comes in clearest from ourselves. Allowing yourself to notice what your nervous system is highlighting can create real, sustainable pathways through our losses and toward integration and long-term expressions of healing. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I'm so grateful you're here. We are big on discussing loss through practical and impactful lenses like the Enneagram. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review so others can find this work too. You can also become a patron of the show for as little as $2 a month and gain access to a workbook for each episode, designed to help you apply these ideas more directly to your own life. Thank you, as always, to the past and present patrons of this podcast. You are making such a big difference. And finally, as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.